Life was good, or so I thought. My wife, Rachel, and I had been married for 10 years, and despite the occasional hiccups, we'd built a solid life together. We had a cozy home, 2 kids under 8, and a shared love for Sunday morning pancakes and late-night movie marathons. I had no reason to doubt Rachel or her love for me. That's why it threw me off when she started acting different. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. She had always been thrifty, preferring homemade crafts to lavish indulgences. But suddenly, she was interested in extravagant gifts, designer handbags, high-end perfumes, and shoes that could rival our mortgage payment. When I teased her about the sudden interest, she laughed it off, saying it was just retail therapy to handle the stress of managing work and kids. Fair enough, I thought. But then came the late nights. Rachel had always been home by 6 p.m. unless work demanded otherwise. Yet now, there were frequent emergency meetings, team dinners, and late-night brainstorming sessions. She always came back with plausible stories about difficult clients or tight deadlines. I wanted to believe her. I did, but my gut told me something didn't add up. The final straw was her energy. Rachel had started taking better care of herself. Yoga classes, new hairstyles, even manicures. Self-care is important, she said, but I couldn't help but notice her transformation seemed geared towards impressing someone. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Rachel was my wife, my partner, my everything. I pushed my doubts aside, chalking them up to my own paranoia. But things changed last Tuesday night. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard her phone buzz repeatedly on the nightstand. It wasn't unusual. Rachel was popular. Her friends often texted her into the night. But this time, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up her phone and saw a name I didn't recognize. Celia. I almost put the phone down. It wasn't like me to snoop. But something in the back of my mind whispered that this wasn't just a friend. The message preview read, "Tonight was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. Face blowing a kiss." I froze. My heart raced, my palms slick with sweat. I clicked the message, half hoping I'd misunderstood. What followed were a series of texts between Rachel and this Celia, detailing late-night plans that didn't match the meetings and work dinners she'd mentioned. The texts weren't explicit, but they hinted at something more, a connection she wasn't sharing with me. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to process, to think, to understand what was happening. Was this a harmless friendship? A fling? Or something more serious? I knew one thing: I needed answers. The next morning, I decided I'd dig deeper. What I found over the coming days would shatter everything I believed about our life together. But for now, I played the dutiful husband, waiting for the right moment to act. After all, Rachel didn't know that her perfect little secret was about to unravel. After reading those texts, sleep became a distant memory. I spent the next 2 nights tossing and turning, replaying the same questions in my mind. Who was Celia? What did incredible mean? And how long had this been going on? On Thursday morning, while Rachel was in the shower, I made my move. Her phone was locked, but I had seen her input the passcode countless times. I couldn't believe I was doing this. I had always prided myself on trusting her, but the gnawing doubt had become too loud to ignore. The messages painted a murkier picture than I had anticipated. Celia wasn't just some random friend or colleague. From their conversations, it was clear she was the middleman, an alias Rachel had created to communicate with someone else. A closer look at their exchanges revealed repeated mentions of him. "Can't wait to see him again. Tell him last night was perfect. I'll let him know Saturday works." The texts weren't damning in themselves, but the context made it clear there was another person involved, a person Rachel didn't want me to know about. My mind raced as I scrolled further, looking for any mention of who this him could be. There was nothing, no name, no clues, just a frustrating trail of breadcrumbs. But then, I found the first crack in her facade. An email confirmation for an expensive restaurant reservation, tucked into her phone's inbox. The dinner was scheduled for the following evening at 8 p.m., at a place neither of us had ever been to, a place I certainly hadn't suggested. The name on the reservation? R. West. Rachel's maiden name. I felt the blood drain from my face as I stared at the screen. This wasn't some misunderstanding. She was planning something, and whoever she was meeting, it wasn't me. That evening, I decided to test her. Over dinner, as she served the kids spaghetti and chatted about her day, I casually asked, "Hey, what are your plans for tomorrow night? Thought we could have a movie night once the kids are asleep." Her response was as smooth as ever. "Oh, I wish. I have a late meeting with my boss. End of week catch up. You know how Joy gets." She laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I smiled and nodded, pretending to buy her lie. But inside, I was crumbling. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with, was feeding me excuses while she planned a secret rendezvous. The next day, I put a plan in motion. I called a friend from college, Nate, who now worked in private security. I explained everything in broad strokes, leaving out the worst details. "I just need to know if she's meeting someone," I told him. "Can you help me follow her?" Nate agreed without hesitation, but not without a word of caution. "Are you sure you want to do this, man? What if you're wrong?" "I need to know the truth," I replied, my voice firmer than I expected. "Whatever it is." At 7:30 p.m., Nate texted me, "I'm in position. She just parked at the restaurant." I sat in the darkened living room, pretending to watch a basketball game while the kids played upstairs. Rachel had left the house an hour earlier, dressed to the nines in a red dress I didn't even know she owned. She'd kissed me on the cheek before leaving, her perfume lingering in the air long after the door shut behind her. Nate's next message came 15 minutes later. "She's not alone. She's with a man." My heart stopped. I stared at the text, willing the words to change, to mean something else. But they didn't. "Who is he?" I typed back. "Can't tell yet. They're at a private table. Do you want me to get closer?" I hesitated, my hands shaking. Was I ready to confront this head-on? To rip the Band-Aid off? After a moment, I replied, "Do it." The next message came with a photo. It wasn't the best quality. Dim lighting and a crowded restaurant made for a grainy image, but it was clear enough. Rachel was leaning in toward a man I didn't recognize, her hand resting on his. They looked cozy, intimate. The man was older, maybe 10 years my senior, with salt and pepper hair and a sharp suit. There was no mistaking their body language. This wasn't a business dinner. This was a date. When Rachel came home later that night, she was all smiles, claiming the meeting had gone longer than expected. She smelled faintly of wine, and when I asked her how it went, she said it was exhausting but productive. I nodded, playing my part. But inside I was seething. I had what I needed. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Saturday morning started like any other. Rachel was in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone while I flipped pancakes for the kids. On the surface, everything seemed normal. But beneath my calm exterior, I was formulating a plan. I couldn't confront her, not yet. The picture Nate sent had shattered my trust. But I needed more. More proof. More leverage. If I approached her now, she'd either deny it or twist the story. I couldn't give her that chance. Instead, I played my role perfectly. "Hey, babe," I said casually, setting a plate in front of her. "The kids and I were thinking of hitting the park later. You want to join us?" She glanced up, her expression slightly guarded. "Oh, I wish I could. But I have a ton of errands to run today. Groceries, dry cleaning, the works." "Busy, huh?" I smiled. "Maybe we can do a family dinner tomorrow instead." "Sounds perfect," she replied, leaning over to kiss me on the cheek. I stiffened slightly, hoping she didn't notice. Later that afternoon, while Rachel was running errands, I called Nate again. I needed to know where she was going, and more importantly, who she was meeting. Nate's voice crackled over the line. "You sure you want to keep this up? It's gonna hurt if we find more." "I need everything," I said, my tone firm. "Every detail." By 2 p.m., Nate texted me. "She just parked at a boutique downtown. The guy's not here. Yet." I gritted my teeth, pacing the living room as the kids played upstairs. Another text followed shortly after. "She's trying on clothes. Expensive stuff. Could be getting ready for tonight." Tonight? What was happening tonight? I felt my stomach tighten as I realized I had no idea what her plans were. She hadn't mentioned anything to me, but then again, why would she? I was the fool she thought she could lie to. By the time Rachel came home, it was nearly 5 p.m. She was glowing, her cheeks flushed with excitement as she carried in shopping bags. "Looks like you had a productive day," I remarked, forcing a smile. "Oh, just the usual," she replied breezily, setting the bags down. "I found a couple of cute things on sale. Anything you want to show off?" I teased, keeping my tone light. She hesitated for a split second, then shook her head. "Nah, just some basics. Nothing exciting." Her response was a lie, and I knew it. Nate had sent me a picture of her carrying a bag from an upscale boutique that didn't exactly scream basics. That evening, Rachel was in the shower when I finally made my move. I grabbed her phone from the nightstand, my heart pounding in my chest. The messages I found confirmed my suspicions. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place as before. Yes, I'll be there at 8. Counting the minutes. Red heart." The sender was listed under Celia, but it was clear these weren't messages from a friend. The time and location lined up perfectly with her previous outings. This wasn't just an affair, it was a routine. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to myself. My hands were trembling, but my resolve was solidifying. I had proof now, enough to confront her if I wanted. But still, I hesitated. Was tonight the right time? Or should I wait? Let her dig herself deeper, and catch her red-handed? The thought of her walking out that door to meet him again made my blood boil, but I had to play it smart. I needed this to end in a way that left no room for doubt or escape. When Rachel stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel and humming softly, I forced a smile. "You look happy," I said. "Just a nice hot shower," she replied, ruffling her damp hair. "What's for dinner?" "Pizza," I said. "Figured we'd keep it easy tonight." She grinned. "Perfect." We ate dinner as a family, laughing and joking as if nothing was wrong. But my mind was elsewhere, focused on the trap I was about to set. Rachel thought she was in control, that she had me fooled. But she didn't realize I was watching her every move. Tonight I'd follow her, and if she was meeting him, I'd be there to see it with my own eyes. By 7 p.m., Rachel was getting ready. She claimed she was meeting an old college friend for dinner. Just a quick catch-up, nothing fancy. Her voice was light, casual, as if she hadn't just spent the day shopping for an outfit to impress someone else. I nodded along, playing the part of the unsuspecting husband. "That's great, babe," I said, watching her carefully apply makeup in the bathroom mirror. "What time are you meeting her?" 8, she replied, glancing at me through the mirror with a quick smile. "Don't wait up. I might be late." I gave her a small wave as she headed out the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The moment I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I grabbed my keys and slipped outside. Nate was already waiting down the street in his car, as planned. "She's heading toward downtown," Nate said as I climbed into the passenger seat. "Let's go," I replied, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We followed her at a safe distance, careful not to get too close. Rachel's car weaved through traffic, eventually pulling into a dimly lit parking lot behind a boutique hotel. Nate and I parked a block away, watching as she stepped out of her car. She wasn't dressed for a casual dinner with a friend. The sleek black dress hugged her figure, paired with heels that clicked softly against the pavement as she walked toward the hotel entrance. She paused briefly, checking her phone, before heading inside. "Think she's meeting him here?" Nate asked, his voice low. "Only one way to find out," I muttered, already opening the car door. Inside the hotel, the lobby was quiet, with soft jazz music playing in the background. Rachel was nowhere to be seen. I approached the front desk, pretending to look for someone. "Hi," I said, flashing a polite smile. "I'm meeting my wife here." She might have checked in already. "Rachel West." The receptionist hesitated, glancing at her screen. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't give out that information." "Of course," I said quickly, backing away. I didn't want to raise suspicion. Instead, I retreated to a corner of the lobby, pretending to browse my phone while keeping an eye on the elevator. About 15 minutes later, I saw her. Rachel stepped off the elevator with a man by her side. My stomach turned as I recognized him from the photo Nate had sent the night before. Older, confident, and clearly at ease, he rested a hand on the small of her back as they walked toward the bar. I stayed out of sight, my pulse racing. Nate was watching from the hotel entrance, giving me a subtle nod to confirm they were sitting at a table near the window. "I need to get closer," I said quietly, my jaw tight. "Don't do anything stupid," Nate warned. "You're here to observe, not confront." I nodded, but my emotions were boiling over. Keeping a safe distance, I slipped into the bar and took a seat at a high-top table behind a potted plant. From here, I could see them clearly. Rachel was leaning forward, her face lit with laughter. The man him was grinning, sipping his drink as he reached across the table to touch her hand. They looked like a couple, comfortable, familiar. It took everything I had not to storm over and demand answers. But I knew I couldn't act yet. Not here, not now. I needed to stay calm to let this play out. After about an hour, they left the bar and headed toward the elevators. My chest tightened as I realized what this meant. I wanted to look away, to leave and pretend I hadn't seen any of it. But I couldn't. I followed them at a distance, watching as they disappeared behind the elevator doors. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the numbers as the elevator ascended. My hands clenched into fists, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Nate appeared at my side, his expression grim. "They went up to the 4th floor," he said quietly. "What now?" I didn't answer. My mind was racing, torn between storming upstairs and walking away forever. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a complete dismantling of everything I thought I knew about my wife. "Now," I said finally, my voice shaking, "we wait." The next 30 minutes were pure agony. Nate and I stayed in the lobby, pretending to blend in while my mind raced with possibilities. Every second that passed felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. "They've been up there a while," Nate said softly, breaking the silence. "Yeah," I muttered, my jaw tight. I couldn't bring myself to say more. Every fiber of my being wanted to charge upstairs, to demand answers, to see the truth with my own eyes. But a small, calm voice in the back of my mind stopped me. Not yet. I had to play this smart. If I acted now, I'd lose the element of surprise. I needed to know more, how deep this went, how long it had been happening, and whether it was just him or if there were others. "Let's give it another 15 minutes, I said finally, my voice barely audible. Nate nodded, his expression unreadable. Exactly 12 minutes later, the elevator doors opened. I froze as Rachel stepped out, smoothing her dress and glancing around the lobby. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair slightly tousled. She didn't notice me or Nate as she headed toward the exit. I waited a few moments before following her outside, keeping my distance. She got into her car and drove off without hesitation. My hands clenched into fists as I watched her taillights disappear into the night. "Do you want to follow her?" Nate asked, his voice low. "No," I said, shaking my head. "Let her think she got away with it. For now." The next morning, I acted as though everything was normal. Rachel was her usual cheerful self, humming in the kitchen as she prepared breakfast for the kids. She leaned over to kiss me on the cheek, her lips lingering for just a second longer than usual. "Thanks for being so understanding about last night," she said with a smile. "It was great catching up with Sarah. We should all have dinner together soon." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Sounds good." Inside, I was seething. The lies came so easily to her, as if our entire marriage was just a performance. But I wasn't about to let her know I was on to her. Not yet. Later that day, I called Nate to strategize. "I need more," I told him. "I need to know who this guy is, how long this has been going on, and if there's anyone else." "Understood," Nate replied. "But you sure you want to dig deeper? It's gonna hurt, man." "I don't care," I said firmly. "I want the whole truth." Over the next week, Nate uncovered more than I expected, or was prepared for. The man Rachel had been seeing was a colleague from her office. His name was Evan Michaels, and he wasn't just some random fling. They'd been carrying on an affair for nearly 6 months. Nate found text messages, emails, and even photos of them together at company events. What's worse, Rachel had used family money, our money, to buy gifts for Evan. A watch, a weekend trip, even that black dress she'd worn to the hotel. Every piece of evidence was like a punch to the gut. But the hardest blow came when Nate showed me a photo of Rachel and Evan, taken just 2 weeks earlier. They were sitting on a park bench, laughing as they watched a street performer. Rachel's head rested on his shoulder, her expression one of pure contentment. It was the look she used to give me. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed. Emails, photos, receipts, an airtight case against her. But I still hadn't decided how to confront her. Should I do it privately, in front of our kids? Or should I make a public spectacle, exposing her for the liar she was? Part of me wanted revenge. I wanted her to feel the same pain she'd inflicted on me. But another part, the rational part, knew I needed to think carefully. This wasn't just about us. It was about the kids, the life we built, and what would come next. Let's meet tomorrow, I told Nate over the phone. I have a plan. That night, as Rachel slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind. The lies, the betrayal, the image of her with Evan. My chest felt heavy, but my resolve was stronger than ever. Tomorrow the mask would come off. Sunday morning started like any other. Rachel was up early, making breakfast for the kids while I pretended to be engrossed in the newspaper. My stomach churned with a mix of anger and anticipation. Today was the day everything would come to light. After breakfast, I sent the kids outside to play. Rachel was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she cleaned up. I stood in the doorway, watching her, my heart pounding in my chest. How had we gotten here? How had she turned into someone I barely recognized? Rachel, I said, my voice steady but firm. We need to talk. She turned, surprised by my tone. Sure, what's up? I motioned for her to sit at the dining table. She hesitated but complied, wiping her hands on a dish towel before taking a seat. I sat across from her, my hands clasped tightly together. There's something I've been noticing lately. I began, choosing my words carefully. You've been acting different, more distant, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on. Her brow furrowed, but she didn't say anything. I wanted to trust you, I continued. But there were too many things that didn't add up. The late nights, the new clothes, the unexplained expenses. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. Her face paled. What are you talking about? I had you followed, I said bluntly. I know about Evan. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. What are you talking about? Evan? My coworker. Don't, I said sharply, my voice rising. Don't insult my intelligence. I've seen the texts, the emails, the photos. I know about the hotel, the dinners, the gifts. I know everything, Rachel. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for the right words. It's not what you think, she said finally, her voice trembling. Evan and I are just friends. I laughed bitterly. Friends? Friends don't meet in hotel rooms, Rachel. Friends don't lie to their husbands and use family money to buy expensive gifts. Do you think I'm stupid? Tears welled up in her eyes. Jack, please, let me explain. Explain what? I snapped. That you've been lying to me for 6 months? That you've been throwing away everything we built for him? She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. She didn't get to cry. Not after what she'd done. I didn't mean for it to happen, she choked out. It just did. I felt so lost, Jack. So unappreciated. Unappreciated, I repeated, my voice incredulous. I've spent the last 10 years building a life for us, for our kids. Everything I've done has been for this family. And you felt unappreciated. Her sobs grew louder, but I couldn't stop. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it all came pouring out. You had a choice, I said, my voice cold. You could have come to me. You could have told me how you were feeling. But instead, you chose to lie. You chose him. Jack, I'm sorry, she whispered. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I love you. I love our family. Please, can we work through this? I leaned back in my chair, staring at her through narrowed eyes. You don't get to decide that. You destroyed my trust, Rachel. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To look at the person you love and wonder if anything they've said or done has been real. She didn't respond. She just sat there, her shoulders shaking as she cried. I'm done, I said finally, my voice hollow. I can't do this anymore. Her head shot up, her eyes wide. Jack, please, don't say that. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, anything you want. I wanted a wife I could trust, I said quietly. And you made it clear that's not you. I stood, grabbing my car keys from the counter. I'm taking the kids to my parents for the day. When I get back, I want you gone. Her face crumpled as she reached for me. Jack, please. But I was already walking away. As I drove away with the kids in the back seat, I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. This wasn't how I'd envisioned my life, but at least now I had clarity. The mask was off and there was no going back. The drive to my parents' house felt surreal. The kids were chattering in the back seat, blissfully unaware of the storm raging inside me. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel as I replayed the confrontation with Rachel in my mind. Her tears, her excuses. It all felt hollow. I couldn't shake the image of her with Evan, laughing, touching, betraying everything we had built. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, my dad was out front trimming the hedges. He waved, a smile breaking across his face. I forced myself to smile back, but it felt like a mask, fragile and false. Hey Jack, he said, wiping his hands on his jeans as I climbed out of the car. What brings you by? Didn't expect to see you today. Hey, Dad, I said, my voice strained. Thought the kids might like to hang out here for a bit. You mind? Of course not, he said, his brow furrowing as he studied me. Everything okay? I hesitated, not wanting to unravel in front of him. Yeah, just a long week. He didn't look convinced, but he nodded. All right, you know where the coffee is if you need it. Inside, the kids settled into the living room with my mom, who was thrilled to see them. I slipped out to the back porch, my phone in hand. I needed to talk to someone, and there was only one person who came to mind. Hey Nate, I said when he picked up. Thanks for everything, man. I confronted her this morning. And? Nate asked, his voice cautious. She admitted to it, tried to spin it like it was a mistake, that she felt neglected. Typical garbage. Damn, he said after a moment. What's your plan now? I stared out at the yard, the sunlight glinting off the leaves. She's packing her things. I told her to leave by the time I get home. Good, Nate said firmly. You deserve better than this, Jack. Yeah, I said quietly, though the weight in my chest felt heavier than ever. I didn't think it would end like this. None of us ever do, Nate replied. But you did the right thing. You couldn't let her keep lying to you. By the time I left my parents' house, it was late afternoon. The drive home was silent, just me and the hum of the engine. I wasn't sure what I'd walk into, but I steeled myself for whatever came next. When I opened the door, the house was eerily quiet. Rachel's shoes were gone from the entryway, her favorite blanket missing from the couch. I stepped into the bedroom and saw the emptiness there, too. The closet, once crowded with her clothes, was half empty. A note sat on the dresser, scrawled in her familiar handwriting. Jack, I'm so sorry for everything. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I don't know how I let things get so far, but I do know I love you and the kids. I hope one day you'll find it in your heart to forgive me. Rachel. I crumpled the note in my hand, anger surging through me again. Fuck you here. The audacity of it stung. She wasn't sorry she betrayed me. She was sorry she got caught. That evening, as I sat on the couch, the house felt unbearably quiet. The kids were still at my parents', and for the first time in years I was alone. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a text from Nate. "How are you holding up?" I typed back, "Not great, but I'll survive." His response came quickly. "If you need anything, let me know. You're not alone in this." I appreciated the sentiment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was alone. My marriage was over, my trust shattered, and the life I thought I had was gone. But even in the wreckage, there was a glimmer of something else. Freedom. Freedom to rebuild. Freedom to heal. Tomorrow I'd start picking up the pieces. The house felt cavernous that first night without Rachel. Every creak and groan seemed louder, every shadow longer. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty half of the closet. It was strange how quickly she'd erased herself from the space, leaving behind only traces of her existence. A stray earring, a forgotten scarf draped over the chair. I didn't sleep much. My thoughts were a carousel of anger, sadness, and confusion. Was it something I'd done? Was I not enough? But no matter how much I tried to blame myself, the cold truth remained. She made the choice. She betrayed me. The next morning, I picked up the kids from my parents' house. They were full of stories about the adventures they'd had with Grandma and Grandpa. Their laughter was like a balm, soothing the jagged edges of my emotions. For them, I had to stay strong. They didn't need to see their father unraveling. "Where's Mommy?" my youngest asked as we pulled into the driveway. "She's staying with a friend for a little while," I said carefully. "But don't worry, we'll see her soon." It was the best I could offer without shattering their innocence. For now, they didn't need to know the full story. Over the next few days, I threw myself into a routine. I took the kids to school, cooked meals, and worked through the mountain of paperwork that came with being a single parent. It was exhausting, but it kept my mind occupied. At night, when the house was quiet again, the reality of my situation would creep back in. Nate called regularly to check in. He'd become more than a friend, he was a lifeline. "Have you talked to a lawyer yet?" he asked during one of our conversations. "Not yet," I admitted. "I've been putting it off." "You need to get on that," he said firmly. "You've got to protect yourself and the kids. Don't let her take advantage of this situation." He was right, of course. As much as I wanted to bury my head in the sand, I couldn't afford to. Rachel had already proven she was capable of deception. I couldn't trust her to play fair. The next morning, I made an appointment with a divorce attorney. Sitting in the lawyer's office was surreal. The sterile decor, the framed certificates on the wall, the sharp-eyed woman across the desk. It all felt too clinical for the emotional hurricane I was living through. "I want full custody of the kids," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "And I want to make sure she doesn't touch the house. I built this life for them, and I'm not going to let her take it away." The lawyer nodded, taking notes. "Do you have proof of her infidelity?" "Yes," I said, sliding the folder of evidence Nate had helped me compile across the desk. Emails, photos, receipts, it was all there. She flipped through the pages, her expression unreadable. "This is strong," she said after a moment. "We can use this to negotiate a favorable settlement. But be prepared. She might fight back." "Let her," I said, my jaw tightening. "I'm not backing down." That evening, Rachel called. Her number flashed on the screen, and I hesitated before answering. "Jack," she began, her voice soft. "How are the kids?" "They're fine," I said curtly. "What do you want, Rachel?" She sighed. I wanted to talk. About everything." "There's nothing to talk about," I said coldly. "You made your choices. Now you have to live with them." "Please, Jack," she pleaded. "I made a mistake. I know I hurt you, but I still love you. Can't we work this out?" Her words sent a surge of anger through me. "Work it out? You lied to me for months, Rachel. You cheated. You don't get to work it out after that." There was silence on the other end, followed by a quiet sob. "I didn't want it to end like this," she whispered. "Neither did I," I said, my voice hard. "But you ended it the moment you betrayed me. We're done, Rachel." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Relief. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. The pieces were still broken, but I was starting to see how they might fit back together. The days following my conversation with Rachel felt like walking a tightrope. I had to juggle the kids' routines, work, and meetings with my lawyer, all while trying to process the emotional aftermath of everything. Each day blurred into the next, but amidst the chaos, I started finding small moments of clarity. Rachel hadn't contacted me since our last conversation, which was both a relief and unsettling. Part of me wanted her to try harder, to grovel, to admit the full extent of what she'd done. But another part of me was grateful for the silence. It gave me the space I needed to think. One morning, as I was packing the kids' lunches, my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen and saw Nate's name. "Hey," I said, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder as I sliced an apple. "What's up?" "You're not going to believe this," Nate said, his tone serious. "What now?" "Rachel's been meeting with Evan." I froze, the knife hovering midair. "What?" "I had a hunch she'd go running to him after everything, so I kept tabs," Nate continued. "They've been meeting up at his place. She's still seeing him." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. After everything, she was still choosing him. "Unbelievable," I muttered, my grip tightening on the knife. "She's not even trying to hide it anymore, is she?" "Nope," Nate said grimly. "But here's the thing, you can use this. If she's prioritizing her affair over the kids, it'll help your case for custody." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thanks, Nate. I'll let my lawyer know." That evening, Rachel texted, "Can we meet? Just the two of us. I want to talk." I stared at the message, torn between curiosity and anger. What could she possibly have to say now? After a long pause, I replied, "Fine. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. The coffee shop on Main." Her response was almost immediate. "Thank you, Jack. I'll be there." The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop early, sitting at a corner table where I could see the door. Rachel arrived a few minutes later, looking nervous as she scanned the room. When her eyes met mine, she hesitated before walking over. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sitting down across from me. She looked different, tired, worn down, like the weight of her choices was finally catching up to her. "What do you want, Rachel?" I asked bluntly. She flinched but didn't look away. "I want to fix this, Jack. For the kids, for us. I know I've messed up, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "What's right to you? Because last I checked, you were still seeing Evan." Her eyes widened, and she stammered, How do you know that?" "It doesn't matter how I know," I said coldly. "What matters is that you haven't changed. You're still lying, Rachel. Still sneaking around." Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't know how to stop, Jack. I was in so deep, and I didn't want to face what I'd done. "You mean you didn't want to face the consequences?" I corrected her. "You thought you could have it both ways, me and him. But that's not how this works." She wiped her eyes, her voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to be a part of the kids' lives. Please, Jack, don't take them away from me." I stared at her, my heart a mix of anger and pity. "That's up to the court now," I said evenly. "But if you want to be in their lives, you'd better start showing it. That means putting them first, not your affair." She nodded, sniffling. "I will. I promise." I stood, grabbing my jacket. "We'll see." As I drove home, I felt a strange sense of closure. For the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for her to change anymore. I didn't need her to admit she was wrong or beg for forgiveness. I was done carrying the weight of her choices. Now it was time to focus on what really mattered. Me, my kids, and the life I was building without her. The court date came faster than I expected. It had been weeks of preparation. Meetings with my lawyer, gathering evidence, and mentally bracing myself for what lay ahead. My focus was on the kids. They were the only thing that mattered now. Rachel had agreed to mediation before the hearing, which surprised me. Part of me thought she'd fight harder, but it seemed even she understood the damage she'd done. Maybe she was tired of pretending. Maybe she'd finally realized that her lies had left no room for reconciliation. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. A navy suit, a crisp white shirt, and a tie my daughter had picked out for me years ago. Felt like armor, a reminder of who I was fighting for. As I drove to the courthouse, my mind raced with everything that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the confrontation, the emptiness. But today wasn't about the past. It was about the future. Rachel and I sat at separate tables in the courtroom, a chasm between us that felt insurmountable. She looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her lawyer whispered something to her, and she nodded, her eyes darting toward me. My lawyer presented our case with precision, detailing Rachel's infidelity and its impact on our family. The evidence Nate had gathered spoke volumes. Photos, receipts, and emails painting a clear picture of her choices. Rachel's lawyer tried to downplay it, focusing instead on her desire to remain an active parent. But the judge seemed unimpressed. When it was Rachel's turn to speak, she stood shakily, her voice trembling as she addressed the court. "I know I've made mistakes," she said, glancing at me, "and I'll regret them for the rest of my life. But my children are everything to me. I want to be there for them, to prove that I can still be a good mother." Her words stung, but I stayed composed. I wasn't here to punish her. I was here to protect my kids. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. I was awarded primary custody, with Rachel receiving visitation rights. The house would remain mine, ensuring stability for the kids. It was a fair outcome, but as I left the courtroom, I didn't feel victorious, just relieved. Outside, Rachel caught up to me. "Jack," she called, her voice soft. "Can I talk to you?" I turned, weary but willing to listen. "What is it?" She hesitated, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you for not taking them away completely. I know I don't deserve it." I nodded, my expression unreadable. "They deserve both parents. Just make better choices, Rachel." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I will." I walked away without another word, the weight of the past few months lifting slightly with each step. Life after the divorce wasn't easy, but it was better. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I threw myself into being the best father I could be, finding joy in the small moments, helping with homework, cheering at soccer games, and tucking them in at night. Rachel was true to her word, showing up for her visitation times and keeping things civil. Over time, we found a rhythm that worked, though the bond between us was irreparably broken. Months later, on a quiet evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset with a cold beer in hand. The kids were playing in the yard, their laughter filling the air. It wasn't the life I had envisioned, but it was mine, and it was enough. As I watched them chase fireflies, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer defined me. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living, and for the first time in a long time, I believed the future could be bright.